Susan Sygall is an extraordinarily powerful disability rights advocate and civil rights leader. She is Mobility International USA's co-founder, which she co-founded in 1981. MIUSA's mission is to empower people with disabilities to achieve their human rights through international exchange and international development. Susan was the recipient of a MacArthur Foundation Fellowship in 2000 and named an Ashoka Fellow in 2013. What I most know about Susan Sygall is she is a wild woman. Susan?
Okay, am I on? All right, I am on. Well, first I have to say thank you for that amazing talk. I was very worried. I thought I was going to have to follow a stuffed turtle that's on your desk. So I'm a little relieved. So first I want to say that there are 6 words that changed my life. People with disabilities are encouraged to apply. Okay, that's 7. I was never good at math. But when I read those 6 words, or 7 words, I read them while I was a student at the University of California in Berkeley, and it was on an application to be a graduate Rotary Scholar, to study in Australia, all expenses paid. I thought, wow, this sounds incredible. And so I was accepted, and there I was in Brisbane, Australia, one of 3 students with disabilities on campus, and I was the only student, the only international student with a disability. And at this time, it was in the 1970s, so there were almost no students with disabilities studying abroad. And I had the most amazing year. During the break, I hitchhiked in my wheelchair for 6 weeks through New Zealand, because that's what young students did. And it literally never crossed my mind that you wouldn't do that in a wheelchair. And all right, I'm going to tell you the truth. I also hitchhiked with a friend of mine, and he was also in a wheelchair. And so there we were, 2 people in wheelchairs with our thumbs out, hitchhiking through New Zealand for 6 weeks. And for those 6 weeks, we stayed in people's homes almost every night. We had probably the most amazing year. And after studying for 1 year at the University of Queensland in Brisbane, I met another woman who was a student from Canada. And she and I decided that we would take the long way home. We would go home via local buses, going through Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. And yes, I schlepped my wheelchair up these inaccessible buses where most people in small villages had probably never even seen a person in a wheelchair. And then one day, somewhere in rural Thailand, in a really small village, I saw a small boy. And he was begging in the street, probably had cerebral palsy. And there he had with his little bowl on the floor where he was lying. And he looked at my high-tech purple sports wheelchair, and he looked at it in amazement. And I looked at him. And I didn't see pity as others did who were throwing coins into his little bowl. I only had one thought. And that thought was family. He is family. Although our lives are vastly different, we're from different countries, different cultures, different economies, we both had faced discrimination, and we both had faced lowered expectations of what is possible. But when our eyes locked, I saw just for a second a glimmer in his eye of what could be possible. We were family. We were part of a global family, but we had not connected. And that moment has stayed with me for my whole life. And it stayed with me in such a powerful way that 1 year after I had finished my year in Australia, I returned back here to Eugene, and I co-founded, as Marshall said, Mobility International USA, which is called MIUSA. And MIUSA is now in its 35th year. I did start it when I was 12 years old. And we have organized international leadership exchanges so that people with disabilities throughout the world can share our stories, our strategies to make changes in the world. Because I want people with disabilities from other countries to come here to the United States, to Oregon, and see what others thought was impossible, like accessible transportation or inclusive schools. And we invite delegations of disabled people and parents from the United States to go to other countries from ages 16 years old to 60 to 70 years old, so that people from the US can share their expertise with other people in other countries, so they can not only make changes in those countries, but also learn from people in those countries. And through these exchanges, we have had over 2,300 alumni from over 114 countries who are now around the world being change makers. But when I returned to Australia, from Australia, I asked myself two questions. One, why aren't disabled people sharing their stories and their strategies so that all of us all over the world can have the same rights as our non-disabled peers? And two, I was thinking, I just had the most amazing year in Australia, so where are all the other people with disabilities? Why don't they know that international exchange is possible? Why aren't young girls with disabilities in wheelchairs dreaming of putting a backpack on the back of their wheelchair and studying in Salamanca, Spain? Why aren't blind people dreaming of volunteering in the Peace Corps in Asia? Why aren't deaf young people thinking about applying for a Fulbright scholarship to study in Africa? Or why isn't a young person with a learning disability getting a scholarship to study in France? Or how come someone with Asperger's isn't going to South America on a group study exchange? Who is telling them and their parents that these possibilities are for them? Well, I can tell you who's telling them. I am. Mobility International USA is, and hopefully after this talk, you are all going to be telling them. Right? Yes. Right? Yes. All right. So what are the benefits of study abroad? Well, study abroad has become one of the most important components in 21st century education. And new studies have shown that by studying abroad, it has a positive impact on things like creativity, problem solving, adaptability, and student success. It creates a global mindset, learning new languages and cultures. It builds confidence. Study abroad alumni find jobs sooner and have a better chance of getting into college. So can you imagine you are a deaf-blind person and you write on your college application that, you just came back from volunteering in Mali. Well, an alumni of ours who is deaf-blind, who did volunteer in Mali, put that on her college education, and she just graduated from Harvard Law School. Okay, are you convinced yet? Well, you should be, because international exchange is a trampoline. It is a trampoline that takes a student and makes them go, it trampolines them up to getting their highest potential. And if it does that for non-disabled people, then I can tell you that after 35 years of working in this field, and also including my own personal experience, it will trampoline students with disabilities. It will break down every preconceived notion that you may have of yourself as a person with a disability, or any preconceived notion that other people may have of you. Or, as a young disabled alumni said to her disabled peers, don't try to live up to society's expectations of you. They're much too low. So, some of you might be thinking, okay, that sounds interesting, but isn't that a little bit too risky? I mean, if you're blind, aren't there like potholes in other countries? And isn't most of the wheelchair, most of the world is not wheelchair accessible? And oh my God, think of those parents. They would never let their kids go on these trips. Well, that reminds me of a story. And that story is that when I co-founded a recreation and sport program run by and for people with disabilities in Berkeley, we designed a saddle for quadriplegics so they could ride a horse in the regular stable where we built a ramp. And yes, the horses were specially trained. So I presented this idea of a saddle at a recreation conference, and the audience, some of them were horrified. How could you do that? That is terrible. How dangerous. What if the horse fell and rolled over? So I asked a quadriplegic friend of mine who had ridden all his life before he became disabled, who was participating in this program, so what do you think of this risks? And he answered, oh, I think that every quadriplegic should have the right to break their neck twice. So, in conclusion, my dream for disabled people throughout the world, what could it be? Well, I think my dream for disabled people is that we move from inclusion to infiltration. So what does that mean? It means that we have been talking about inclusion for so many years. And yes, it has happened here in the United States, but for most people outside the U.S., in the international world where I work, most people with disabilities have been left out. The literacy rate of disabled girls is as low as 1% in developing countries. So we need to move from inclusion to infiltration. We need to do that so that disabled women can start showing up at HIV/AIDS workshops which prevent HIV/AIDS, and so they can participate in those clinics and get the sign language interpreters that they need. And that disabled children and their parents all over the world can show up to their neighborhood schools and get the ramps that they need so their kids can go to school and have those ramps be an entrance into those schools. And disabled people everywhere need to participate in international exchange, starting in high school all the way up through their whole life, and perhaps even in the United States, maybe it's just going on that national trip to Washington, D.C., where all the non-disabled kids are going, but are all the disabled kids also being included? And disabled students need to infiltrate every activity that non-disabled students do. They need to learn Chinese and Arabic and take all those language courses so that a young 6-year-old girl or boy with cerebral palsy is waking up and dreaming of being the next ambassador to the United Nations. So challenge yourself and change the world. That is one of our mottos. And the other motto comes from our program, which Marshall alluded to, our Women's Institute on Leadership and Disability, where we bring hundreds of disabled women from all over the world to get them empowered to be leaders. And the motto of that program is loud, proud, and passionate. And it is the battle cry of disabled women and girls around the world who are infiltrating their societies and becoming all that they can and all that they should be. And Marshall, Peter, I want to thank you for all that you have done for MIUSA to encourage so many delegates from all over the world for the past 35 years. And Marshall has met them in Eugene and talked about inclusive education and heard their stories and encouraged them to dream big. And I want to thank you, Marshall, for your part in that. Because I believe that if you go confidently in the direction of your dreams, and you create the life that you have imagined, you will meet with success unimagined in early hours. If you have built castles in the air, that is where they should be. And it is my dream that the fabulous, dedicated people who are here today in the room will help students with disabilities build the foundations under those dreams so they can make them come true. And when we make dreams come true for students with disabilities, we are all working to make our world a better place for all. Thank you.